Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another Tech Visionary interview. This time we have Suzanne joined us. Where are you based, Suzanne? Hi.
Hi, how are you? I am from
Good.
Texas. It's really great to be here. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. So we have Susan from Texas. And can you tell us about your background a little bit? You are a Microsoft MVP regional director. What do you do?
So, what I do is really focus on how do we build experiences leveraging Microsoft products or the Microsoft landscape to people in unique and different ways. So, especially with COVID coming on, we really had to think differently and bring experiences differently because the landscapes have changed. So, really focusing in on how do we bring experiences to users in different and new ways for organizations.
That's great. That's a good start for our talk here, which is focused on like user experience, experience design, how these are related together. So for those of our audience who might not be familiar with these concepts, can you just give us a little bit like a quick brief what this is actually?
Sure, I would love to. When you're thinking about building applications or even enabling technologies such as Microsoft Teams or Yammer or SharePoint Online, there are a couple of different aspects, especially when you're working with Office 365 and Microsoft 365 technologies. You have the actual backend technology, which is, the traditional IT classic, hey, turn the lights on, enable the features, those kinds of things that are, really around turning it on. Right. But then you have what we call enabling or enablement of those features to the users. Right. It's around, hey, do I want to enable SharePoint Online with Microsoft Teams, with special applications and that sort of thing. And that's really just enabling what built-in features you have inside the organization and preparing the organization for being able to use those, turning them on, making sure permissions are set, security, governance, compliance, all those things. But then there's another layer, which we call the people layer. And that's really the connection or the connective tissue, if you will, between the actual user and the technology. It's where we actually begin what we call adoption. And before, as I'm sure you're aware, we used to measure how good we were by how many nines we had after the decimal point, right? Now we say we're measuring how good we are on how often and how many people are using what we're deploying. So we have a whole different metric and a whole different game that we need to, deliver outcomes and success to organizations. And the focus that I'm really, highlighting today is what is that user experience and how do we deliver that in a way that's going to be adoptable so that users know what the magic question is, what to use when. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense, and that's a great brief introduction to that. Thank you for that. So, what do you think like organizations can do to leverage this? Do we have always someone with the role of like experience designer or something like that that helps with that, or someone from the adoption team takes this responsibility? How does it start?
So that is a super great question. And one that many organizations are really struggling with because they're like, hey, I used to be able to deliver technologies and applications in what we called silos. I would deliver the technology and then I would throw it over the fence to the trainers and then I would throw it over the fence to the FAQ and help desk support. Well, now you can't deliver technology quite like that. You really have to say, here is what I'm going to enable. These are the tools in my tool bag, if you will. And then here's the things that I'm going to layer on top: automation, artificial intelligence, all those things, Power Platform, all those things we're going to enable on top. We're going to do some development to make it really unique and individual. But to do that at the same time, people don't want to go watch a video anymore. They don't want to be trained. They want it to be very intuitive. And so right alongside any sort of delivery of an application, we do what's called organization change management, which is really around, let me help you through your own groups and your own teams with change champions, understand how this application works. And then once you understand how, who those change champions are, you'll be better able to self-service yourself, through those applications and services. So it's really like a multi-towered approach, right? You have a little bit of technology, you have a little bit of development, you have a little bit of adoption and change management, all mixed together to make soup now. We can't deliver it like we used to, which is just throw it over the fence and hope they will do it or read the documentation.
Correct. Yeah, and I guess this is kind of a role that requires a lot of interaction with many other roles, like designing the experience. Like, for example, this person should be in touch with the architect to design the whole architecture overall, like tools that we are going to use, like the experts of those tools to make sure that this possibility is an option, things like that. How do you see this being as part of a whole team? Like, is this something that usually people use like an in-house resource, like a team to work on all of these together, or normally like consulting services comes in and provide such a service?
So actually, each organization is different because their journey through this maturity platform is really different. Sometimes they say, hey, look, we already have the organization change management figured out. We need you to come in and provide us that expertise around the technology and how we can implement it, either in a custom development situation or in a low code, no code way. So sometimes we'll come in and the consulting will be more of a technical expertise. Sometimes what we're seeing now is a lot of executives are saying, I just did my strategic plan for the next 2 years in 1 month. I don't even know what's next. I need you to come in and help me figure out strategy and approaches to that for the next 2 years, because I don't have a plan anymore. My plan was, oh, we're going to do collaboration for the next 2 years. And well, now that's done. So some organizations are really focusing around strategy, and some are saying, hey, look, we just need that adoption. And the challenge, especially from a technical perspective, is understanding the landscape in just enough where you can really glue all these pieces together. Architects now have to architects have to really have a much broader perspective around cloud services such as Azure, cognitive services, AI, bots, SharePoint, Teams, everything, because it's all mixed in together. So now our knowledge can't, oftentimes is 10 miles wide and 1 mile deep, right? Where before we were able to be very happy being 10 miles deep and just like 50 feet wide. But in order to do those in-depth architectures, you really have to understand what's moving on around you. And because Microsoft and organizations like Microsoft are moving very, very, very fast with technologies and changes, we have to constantly stay on top of what's going on around us, because who knows, if I were just focusing on one thing, I may not be relevant in 6 months because of the changes that they're doing, or they may automatically build that in somewhere that I'm not as relevant. So architectural from a technical perspective has really changed, but also our requirement to really integrate with others has changed.
Correct. Yeah. And you mentioned something that this is more like an ongoing thing. It's not something that we can just leave it at some point and do it like once and then leave it like 5 years to just be like that. This should be something ongoing. What do you see as like some pitfalls that, let's say, some businesses don't do, let's say, proper experience design? What would be the points of let's say, failure for them? What would be things that they are missing if they don't do this?
So one of the key premises that I think around experience design and user, focus design, or customer-centric design, whatever it is you have to really understand what the business is needing, right? You cannot develop 6 months and expect the business to accept it, because the business already moved on, and whatever it is that you were trying to build probably isn't exactly relevant any longer. So some of the mistakes that we're really helping organizations to understand is we have to move in what I call small, measurable, incremental change. MVP, minimum viable product, right? Whatever is your jargon for, we've got to break things down into small, measurable outcomes that we can deliver in chunks so that we can move at the speed of business, right? We can't move however we want to anymore. We have to move at the speed of business. And if we can't, then that's a challenge. We have to be able to turn applications around in a week. Literally, right at the beginning of COVID, people were coming to us saying, hey, help, I've got to get this done. I've got an emergency, figure out how I'm going to deploy laptops, right? Immediately, you don't have 6 months to develop an application anymore. You got overnight to develop the application. So, and we were doing that over and over. And the challenge that, some organizations have is they think they can, now that they're kind of in a steady state, oh, I can go back to taking 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years to develop something, and that just isn't the case anymore. We really have to get more agile and really get stuff out to the business quicker.
Correct. Yeah, and you mentioned measures. What are, let's say, ways that you can measure such a thing, like this was successful, it wasn't that much successful? What are your metrics?
So that is a really great question, and I think it's worthy of a PhD to go figure out now, because in the last 3 or 4 months, the definition of measure just got flipped out on its ear. The reason I say that is because many people think, hey, I want to measure adoption, or I want to measure outcomes from a feedback form or from how many clicks are happening. But really, if we take a step back, measuring the success of something is way more than that. So you have like many different landscapes. So if you remember a few minutes ago, we talked about how there's a technology piece, and then there's the enablement piece, and then there's the people piece. Well, from a reporting perspective, we really have to think about all three, because when you have governance and security and you have to be able to measure that, you don't have people in a controlled situation anymore. So how do you measure? Where are they? What are they working on? Are they doing the right thing? Oh, wait, now they're at home. Who knows what's going on? Grandma's computer could get involved, right? So there's measurement that has to happen at the technical level. Even if you're wanting to deploy a simple power up, right? One of the things that we found is if you don't measure this, you kind of run yourself a risk of having people doing things that you're not aware of. And let me give you an example. We have a development tenant. And in the development tenant, we allow many, many, many people from all over the world to come in and create prototypes and demos of various kinds. And one day we decided to come in and put in a little power app that we were working on developing with a customer around measurement of who's doing what, and power app usage and SharePoint usage and team usage, and different departments, how were they using the application from really an IT focused and centric perspective. And we found, oh my goodness, 200 and something power apps were sitting out there in all stages of whatever. Half of them were using licensing that they shouldn't have been using. We had to go clamp down, re-architect, reorganize how people were using Azure, what subscriptions they were using, all that stuff. And we had no idea until we did some kind of reporting. And you're thinking, oh, well, I would just want to deliver this little power app. The problem is if you don't make sure that you're measuring what they're doing, you're going to potentially, run the risk of, licensing, issues, Azure usage dollars that you're going to be required, all those things. So you really have to start at the technology. Then when you get to the enablement, one of the biggest measures you can do is really say, hey, I have this department and they're doing a really great job and they're using the application and this other department is not. So really breaking down your organization inside those, divisional or departmental groups to say which groups are more successful with certain technologies and which aren't, because those that aren't are likely doing shadow IT. So they're using WhatsApp, they're using text, they're taking pictures where they shouldn't be taking pictures, and they're communicating outside of standards. So coming up with reporting around who's using what and who's not, which is the better case, to say, let me go make sure and do a deep dive that they're doing the right thing. So, and then finally, in the users reporting and how we handle measurements of success around users, that's really about how many people are using the actual application, whether it's a Power App or a Teams app or Teams in general or SharePoint Online in general, just really around, hey, what are they doing and what are they doing the most of? So your applications really should have some kind of thing that says, hey, look, I'm being used in such a way, and recorded that information so you can provide that feedback. Because how many of us, let's be real, actually fill out a feedback form? very few, right? You only fill out a feedback form if you really loved it or you really hated it. So all those silent sufferers or all those silent happiness, you never record because nobody ever does a feedback form. So when you're thinking about user design and design around applications, you really have to think about how can I build in metrics that are going to give me what I need instead of relying on the what we used to use, which is feedback forms. And I know that's kind of the PhD novel answer to your question, but I hope it gives some people in the audience a little bit of understanding around, hey, adoption isn't just how many people click, right? There's a lot more that we could do behind the scenes. And if you're a consultant, this is an opportunity for you to really say, wow, I didn't really think I was into analytics, but these are low-hanging fruits that I can actually do and deliver.
That was a great, let's say, explanation of what like the metrics looks like, and based on that, I kind of think that like this whole user experience or adoption or the whole thing, we might like call it anything, is more like a, let's say, team effort, because it's quite a big thing. Like thinking about these technologies, thinking about how users are using it, like probably business requirement gathering from like stakeholders, then checking every user how they are using it, analytics behind it. So all of these together is like a big project. It's not something small, and
It
I
really is.
yeah, and I think that is something that most of like organizations should consider if they are not considering it already. Anything else you think we have to discuss that I haven't asked about?
Well, there's a couple of things that I just want to kind of share as we've been going through these journeys with many organizations. And it's really around, what we call beauty. I mean, someone like 2 years ago, I saw a session on, how beauty is important, right? And how we as humans want to interact with something that is a reflection of who we are or who our organization is. So as people are building these quick apps, there's often the inclination to just throw the boxes on the page and just, have it be functional. And one of the things that if you really want to make sure you have good adoption is to really think about how this app is a reflection of your company and your organization, right? It takes just a couple minutes to put a logo, to change the colors, to, format it in a clean and easy way that makes it easily digestible without a manual, right? Make it so that I can learn on the fly as I use it instead of me having to read something and take a course, right? So, really one of the concerns that many consultants have even right now is with the advent of low code, no code, where am I going to be able to get my, from? And what we're finding is in the consulting arena, we're more busy than we were before. And we're just focusing our time more on the business use and how we can deliver those applications to users in a easy to use way, rather than spending all of our time in the back office coding, the basics, right? So I really think of this time as an opportunity. I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see a huge dramatic change, and it's going to evolution, and the speed at which we are getting new technologies and new features is going to be ever increasing. So, I just see this as a great opportunity for us, especially those of us who are in consulting or in IT. There's absolutely a place, but you have to be adaptable and ready to change. And so that's probably a message I'd like to share.
Great, thank you. That's definitely a trend coming up, as you mentioned. Awesome, thank you for sharing all of this information. How our audience can get in touch with you? What is the best way?
They can find me on Facebook, or they can find me on Twitter. I don't do Twitter too often, but if you do leave me a message, I do tend to try to check that. So please do find me there. Or you can find me on, any of the email addresses that you see on the screen.
Great, awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time. Really valuable information. And thank you everyone for watching us. Until next time, stay safe. See you.
Thank you.